Hoy tenemos el privilegio de tener con nosotros a la señora Maria Mavris, miembro clave del Departamento de Relaciones con el Paciente de la Agencia Europea del Medicamento, EMA, una mujer destacada que ha estado a la vanguardia de la participación y la defensa de los pacientes en el campo de los asuntos regulatorios y farmacéuticos. Su trabajo se centra principalmente en torno a la tarea vital de involucrar a los pacientes durante todo el ciclo de vida regulatorio. Ella los apoya incansablemente en su participación como miembros de los comités científicos de la EMA, como representantes de sus organizaciones y como personas con experiencias vividas invaluables de diversas enfermedades y sus tratamientos. It is a distinct honor to introduce a remarkable individual who has been at the forefront of patient engagement and advocacy in the field of pharmaceuticals and regulatory affairs. Today, we are privileged to have with us Ms. Maria Mavris. She's a key member of the Public and Stakeholder Engagement Department of EMA. Her work primarily revolves around the vital task of involving patients throughout the entire regulatory life cycle. We are excited to announce that Ms. Maria Mavris will deliver a presentation titled Ema'S Patient-Centered Initiatives in the Post-Era of COVID and in Clinical Trials, to shed light on the critical role of patient engagement in regulatory affairs, especially after the COVID era and within the context of clinical trials. Welcome, Ms. Mavris. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I hope you can hear me. So I will begin by sharing my slides, and we'll start my talk. So today, thank you again for the very kind invitation and very kind introduction. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about the European Medicines Agency, about patient engagement and some of the new initiatives as was mentioned post-COVID, or activities that are happening. But first, I'd like to start with telling you a little bit about who we are as an agency. So we work with experts from all across Europe, and the experts are not only medical and scientific, but patient experts as well. The European Medicines Agency was established in 1995, and we work with committees, so scientific committees. So the experts are part of the scientific committees, and I apologize for the acronyms, but this is the Human Committee, the Veterinary Committee, the Committee for Rare Diseases or Orphans, Herbal, Pediatric, Advanced Therapies, and the PRAC, which is the Safety Committee. We have a management board where the 27 European member states are represented, but also patients and healthcare professionals are represented on this management board. So what do we do as an agency? We facilitate development and access to medicines, evaluate the applications that are submitted by the pharmaceutical industry for marketing authorization. We monitor the safety of medicines across the life cycle and provide reliable information on human and also veterinary medicines to patients and healthcare professionals. What do we, it's also important to know what we don't do. And we do not authorize clinical trials. We are not involved in discussions around pricing or availability of medicines, advertising, patents. We're not responsible for homeopathic medicines or food supplements. And we do not develop treatment guidelines or provide medical advice. This is a very nice leaflet that is linked in the slides, which I think you will receive after the presentation. And it's very nice a description of the journey of a medicine from laboratory to patient, and it's written with the patients in mind. So I would recommend that you read this. So the centralized procedure, which is what was established with the European Medicines Agency, where we have one marketing authorization application, which leads to one authorization, and then we have the product information that's available in all EU languages at the same time. We have the medicine, once it's approved by EMA, is is authorized in all EU countries at the same time, and we have a centralized safety monitoring. And as I mentioned before, we have access to a large network of experts in medicines regulation. This is different to the national procedures, which still exist, of course, but there are certain medicines that have to come to the European Medicines Agency. So there, I just wanted to give you a very quick look at what we do as an agency, and now I'm going to focus on patient engagement. So patient engagement really began from the time that the agency opened in 1995. In this timeline, I'm going to highlight a couple of the major milestones and just explain what they are as I go through. So, of course, we started talking with patients immediately as the agency was created. And then in the year 2000, the patients became the first members of a scientific committee. So here, this is very important because the scientific committees evaluate the medicines. And in this case, it was the orphan committee where the patients were written into the legislation and were there as full voting members. And then this continued with other subsequent legislations, such as the pediatric legislation, the advanced therapy, and then finally the safety legislation to create the pharmacovigilance and risk assessment committee. We then we formalized our interactions with patients in a framework, and here you can see the framework, and then created a working party of patients and consumers. We continue to evolve as we listen to what the patients need, and we also started involving young people, as I heard also from the previous presentation. We still have a lot of work to do here, so any suggestions are very welcome. Also, with COVID, in 2020, we engage patients more in crisis management, and this is ongoing. So here you'll see how we represent patients. So at the EMA, we consider that the patients who are members of the scientific committees or the management board represent the entire patient community across Europe. We work with a large variety of organizations. And as I mentioned, we have the creation of the Patients and Consumers Working Party in 2006. And when the members are there, they are representing their own organization. So they're representing the disease area that they're working for or the umbrella organization. We consult organizations on policies and guidelines, and they're also invited to workshop. And here again, they are representing their organizations. And then finally, as was mentioned during the introduction, we involve individual patients to bring their experience of living with condition and its treatment into different activities, which are listed here. So to start with the patients representing their community, we have the patients, as I mentioned, are members of the Orphan Committee. They're members of the Pediatric Committee, Advanced Therapy, and the Safety Committee. And here they are also members of the Management Board. I mentioned we work with a lot of organizations, and these organizations are what we call eligible organizations because they fulfill certain criteria to work with EMA. And then from the eligible organizations, we select the member organizations who become members of the Patients and Consumers Working Party. So here, in fact, I have not only patients representing their community, but those representing their organizations as well. So the patient involvement in the medicine's regulatory life cycle, this is also very important because we have the 3 phases of the medicine's regulatory life cycle. Underneath this, I have the general activities that are performed by the committees that are described in the blue circles. So, for example, the Orphan Committee will designate a medicine and a disease as rare. The Advanced Therapy Committee will classify a medicine as either a cell, stem, or tissue therapy. But what's important here is you can see that there's patient input all along the stages of the medicine's regulatory life cycle. And above the line, you can also see that there are certain documents that are produced for the public that are reviewed by patients before they are published. So in this stage, I'd like to describe a little bit around the evaluation, because this is a new methodology. So if you heard my talk last year, you may not have heard about this because this is relatively new methodology, where we look at in the evaluation phase, which is where companies request to have their medicine put on the market at the start of day one of this process, which lasts 277 days. But of course, there can be clock stops when the company has to come back with their answers to the questions that are asked. In this case, we are consulting organizations to bring input into what are the needs of their community, what are the treatment options, and just to tell us what they would like from a particular medicine. And here there are still further opportunities in this process for us to consult individuals, where we share more of the confidential information, and then we have to look at the declaration of interest of the individuals. At this stage, no confidential information is shared. So still talking about individual patients, we've seen that there's been an increase in the number of individual patients that have been recruited and work with EMA on different activities. As I mentioned, these are some of the activities where individual patients can bring their experience of living with a condition and its treatment. And if you are interested to register as a patient expert, the link is here on this green button that you can find in the slides. But I'll also leave my email address. And if you are interested in working with EMA to contribute as an individual patient, or even to receive information, you can contact me. So in this slide, I won't go through all of this, but again, you will receive the slides. So it's just to show you where and how in the regulatory process patients are engaged in committee membership, consultation, and these are some of the individual activities. And then also training and resources, because it's important that we support you during your activities. So we have training days, information sheets, we have that we contribute to activities such as this in stakeholder training events. We have webinars and workshops and public meetings. And of course, there's a lot of information on our website. I was asked to also mention something about patient involvement in clinical trials. And to just give a little bit of background, prior to 2004, there was no harmonization. Each of the member states had their own rules and different processes, and this resulted in delays and complications. In 2001, we had the Clinical Trials Directive. There was some harmonization, but there were still national systems and the processes varied. But then we have now the Clinical Trials Regulation, which is full harmonization and collaborative assessment of multinational trials that came into force at the end of January in 2022. This here was just to show that there is a downwards trend in the number of clinical trials in Europe compared to the rest of the world. And for this reason, we really need to look at why this is happening and to try to make Europe a more attractive place for clinical trials. So here you see the pillars of the clinical trial regulation: harmonization, transparency, and safety. But I'd like to just say a couple of words about the initiative called the Accelerating Clinical Trials in the European Union, or ACT EU, that you may have heard of. There's a big meeting that's happening today as well at the same time. So this builds on the momentum of the clinical trials regulation and the clinical trials information system. So it's driven by the European Regulatory Network, and there's some information here that's linked that you're very welcome to look at for more information. But what I wanted to specifically mention here, which is important for patients, is that there's going to be the creation of a multi-stakeholder platform advisory group, and this will also include patients. And there is actually a launch of expression of interest to join the advisory group that you can find again back here on the ACT EU website. So the multi-stakeholder advisory group will bring together patients and healthcare professionals, regulators, inspectorates, academia, researchers, payers, policymakers, health technology assessment, as well as the developers of medicines, ethicists, so everyone to discuss the topics around clinical trials. So the advisory group will provide advice to the ACT-EU program, and also operational input to identify experts and to discuss certain topics with additional experts. So here, I won't go on this too long just because we are running a little bit behind time, but to build common understanding and build relationships and trust. It's very important. It is also very complicated to bring all those stakeholders together and have them talking about topics from their own perspective. But we feel that this will encourage common understanding and build relationships and trust, and therefore move the concept forward of improving clinical trials for everyone. So I'd like to move on now to just say a couple of words about patient experience data. And this, just to define, I'm sorry about how busy this slide is, but it's a definition of patient experience data, which includes patient-reported outcomes, patient preferences, but also patient engagement. Last year, in 2022, on the 21st of September, we had a multi-stakeholder workshop to talk about patient experience data in medicines development and in regulatory decision-making. So this is to show the importance of why we want to bring patient experience data into regulatory decision-making. Patients are, of course, the end users of medicines. And as you know very well, you're experts in your own condition and you understand the treatments. You've had different treatments, and whether it's medical treatment or other, patient experience data helps to bring more patient-relevant outcomes. But it's also here on this side, if we look at the other side of the arrow, that it can be at any stage during clinical trial design, which is also an area where we already bring patients into what we call scientific advice, where we've shown that patients make an impact and they have an added value. During the benefit risk assessment, if you remember when I showed you the evaluation, we talk about the benefits and risks there, and patients are systematically involved in these discussions. And also in the post-marketing pharmacovigilance or safety surveillance, patients are also involved there. So this is other areas, other ways that patient experience data can contribute. So currently what I'd like you to know is that we are working on a reflection paper to discuss patient experience data and how this can be brought into the regulatory activities. There is also a guidance work ongoing at the ICH, or International Committee for Harmonization, for global harmonization on patient experience data. So it's a bigger topic that we will be discussing, that we have been discussing a lot at the European Medicines Agency and will continue to do so. This also links with the new health technology assessment regulation, which is important for the later steps post medicines regulation. So these are the take-home messages about patient experience data, which includes, as I said, patient engagement, as well as patient preferences and patient-reported outcomes. The patient experience data is relevant at all stages of medicines development. And it's also important that the developers systematically involve patients at early stages of medicines development. So just to conclude, and I think we're on time, engaging with patients and their organizations at the EMA brings everyday aspects of living with a disease into scientific discussions. This is very important because you know better than the scientific and medical experts what it means to live with osteoarthritis. It bridges the gap between clinical trial data and real-world data, and hopefully increases trust as you get to see how the regulatory decisions are made. It's a stepwise approach, and as I showed you in our timeline, we keep evolving and keep adding new ideas and new methodologies based on exchanges with patients. It's important to define what you're supposed to do within the regulatory framework to manage expectations, but it really has to be a mutually beneficial activity. So I have my email address here, and I believe the slides will be shared later. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions now or any questions that you might think of later. I'll be more than happy to answer. So with that, I will say thank you and hand back to the chair.
Is Dr. Vergés speaking?
Yes, hello.
No, well, first of all, thank you for your elegant presentation. It's a very elegant presentation, very clear presentation for patients, you know, and I think that it's very important that the enormous work that Emma is doing, I think it's very important that the patients must know it, no? Because Emma is doing a very terrific work in this field, no? That the patients, each time, they collaborate more and more and more. I think this is very important, no? It changed a lot, and I really appreciate your presentation. And next year you must be here, eh? Next year you must be in Barcelona, eh?
With pleasure.
No,
Yes.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are some questions in the room for Maria, please. ¿Alguna pregunta que queráis hacer? Yo creo que ha quedado muy bien expuesta a todo lo que está haciendo la EMA, la Agencia Europea del Medicamento, en todo lo que es la participación de pacientes en los ensayos clínicos. Sorry, there is a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a question to Maria. My name is Gudula Petersen from Grüntal, specialized in pain treatments. And I have a question about patient-friendly medicines leaflets, because this is an initiative from the FDA. I know they are working very hard on this. What is EMA doing in this area?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. We are looking at all sorts of different ways of improving the patient information leaflet. So that we currently are discussing with our quality review of document group, and they are looking at changing the format of the package leaflet. We have patients and also healthcare professionals involved in a subgroup that's working with this group. We are also looking at electronic product information. So there's a lot of things that are ongoing in the background in order to make sure that patients receive appropriate information, up-to-date, legitimate, validated information in a timely fashion to help them with their treatments. So there's a lot ongoing, and so it's a little bit of watch this space. So we are working on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
¿Alguna cuestión más que queráis poner? Tenemos todavía unos 3 minutitos. Si no, pues lo dejamos, si no tenéis ninguna... No question? Okay, I think this is very clear, Maria, and thank you very much. We appreciate that you take in mind to us, OAFI, that we have a lot of patients in osteoarthritis and in osteoporosis, no? And for us it's very important that to participate and to take to have the voice to you, to them. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I wish you a good rest of meeting.
Thank you, Maria. Gràcies, doctor Vergés.